There are so many wrestlers in the world today, and just like in regular society, there are various cases of wrestlers who turn out to be horrible criminals who have committed horrible crimes. So today I'm going to discuss many such cases, ranging from stories you might already know to some with names that you may have never heard of. Let's begin. The first thing you're probably asking right now is who the hell is Brian McGee? And I'll tell you, I had no idea who Brian McGee was or anything about this story until I was researching for this video. I've literally found out about him in the last 24 hours. Brian McGee is a wrestler who wrestled in Florida under the name DT Porter, and I think I might just read off his biography paragraph from his pro wrestling fandom Wikipedia, because this has aged so incredibly poorly. DT Porter has never had it easy. Most of his childhood, he was an outcast, bullied and teased for not having as much as the other children in his neighborhood. It wasn't until high school that DT broke out of his shell by becoming a star in varsity sports. After high school, DT joined the Navy, learning toughness, discipline, and embracing a newfound confidence. After serving his country, DT took to the ring with an attitude of never say die. Once the oppressed, DT is now the one doing the enforcing, determined to take out all of his childhood pain and torment out on the bodies of his opposition. DT lacks mercy and will deliver great anger and furious vengeance on any who stands in his way. Brian began wrestling as DT Porter in 2006 and wrestled across the indie scene all through America. He even had a tryout match against Apollo Crews for IWA Mid-South. How crazy is that? But he got his big break in 2011 when he was signed to a WWE developmental deal wrestling for FCW. He made his FCW debut on the 3rd of March FCW event in 2011. It was a 6-man tag. Him, Buck Dixon, and Kenny Lee lost to Big E Langston, Kenneth Cameron aka Tom Latimer, and Rick Vaughn. He had another match a month later at an FCW event in the FCW arena. Him and Deshaun Bishop were defeated by Buck Dixon and Eric Rowan. But unfortunately, that would be his last FCW match, and he was cut from the company after only just a year, going 0-2 in the company. But this would not stop him in his wrestling career, as he would continue to wrestle in Florida. He would wrestle for more regional indies there, wrestle for places such as the NWA, 01, and of course the Team Vision. Come on. Someone shut down this fucking school already. Oh my days, of course he went there. His wrestling career heavily slowed down since leaving FCW, and eventually it would come to a crashing halt after a huge revelation about him. In July 2013, Brian McGee was arrested facing charges of murder after a fatal stabbing of his girlfriend. Quoting from the Ledger, officials said the series of events started when a woman was found stabbed to death at the Del Lago apartments in Tampa. The woman, whose identity has not been released yet, died at the scene. Authorities only said McGee and the woman killed did know each other. Deputies said they quickly knew who they were looking for. Officials said when authorities tracked McGee down, he led them on a car chase on Interstate 75 from Hillsborough County to County Line Road in Pasco County. After his car crashed, McGee was taken into custody and transported to St. Joseph Hospital, where he is being treated for undisclosed injuries. Officials said once he is released, he will be charged with first-degree murder. He also allegedly changed his Facebook profile picture to what allegedly looked to be limbs covered in blood. And he was indeed charged with first-degree murder, and as of 2017, he was still in prison, but I've not been able to find any further updates since. The Hart family is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, and most successful wrestling dynasties of all time. Bret Hart, Jim the Anvil, the British Bulldog, Natalia, and of course, Teddy Hart. Teddy Hart is the outcast of the Hart family, and for reasons I'm about to explain, hopefully you'll be able to understand why. After graduating the Hart Dungeon in 1998, Teddy Hart became the youngest wrestler to ever be signed to a WWF developmental contract at just 18 years old. He was sent to go train with Dory Funk Jr., however after 4 years he was cut loose, never making a major appearance for the company. He was released for what was perceived to be attitude problems, and this was about to become a very common theme in his career. Despite being released from WWE, Teddy Hart's career was far from over. In 2003, he would begin making appearances for Ring of Honor and TNA. However, he was gone from these companies even quicker than he was gone from the WWE. On November 1st, 2003, Hart competed in a scramble match at a Ring of Honor event in Elizabeth, New Jersey. After losing the match, he then began just doing flips and moonsaults off the top of the cage onto the other wrestlers. Over and over again. He just kept climbing the cage and jumping onto the other wrestlers. It was a mad thing to watch. He did it so many times to the point he ended up throwing up at ringside, and his actions annoyed the other wrestlers as he was not meant to be in the match, and having to just constantly catch this guy who keeps jumping off the cage without anyone's permission is kind of just annoying, just being a complete delinquent. After this, Teddy Hart would only wrestle 2 more matches with Ring of Honor ever, once in 2004 and a 1-match return in 2009. And it was also because of this moment that Teddy would not last much longer in TNA. He would only wrestle a couple matches for TNA before, get this, getting into an altercation with CM Punk. Some things never change. The altercation came about due to his actions at the Elizabeth show, meaning in just the first 4 years of his career, Teddy Hart has already been blacklisted from the top 3 promotions in the country. For the next few years, Teddy Hart would be hired and fired by Jersey All Pro Wrestling, AAA. He would make a sensational return to the WWE, where he'd unfortunately get released before making it to the main roster, but seemingly not for disciplinary issues this time round, so fair enough. And he would also appear in Wrestling Society X, which is perhaps the biggest promotion that he had a proper run with and was never technically fired from. The show was cancelled, he was never released for attitude problems. That and MLW. He returned to MLW in 2017, where he was middleweight champion and part of the New Hart Foundation with Davey Boy Smith Jr. and Brian Pillman Jr. However, he was released from the company in 2019 for, yep, you guessed it, disciplinary issues. Since then, Teddy Hart has not been active much in wrestling, having not wrestled since 2020. That's his wrestling career, but we haven't even hit the tip of the iceberg with Teddy Hart. We still have all of his legal issues to cover. Before we go any further though, we are going to give a quick content warning to say we're about to be discussing topics such as sexual assault and abuse. You can use the timestamps to skip forward past this part if you do wish. On December 3rd, 2014, Hart was announced as wanted by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police on sexual assault charges, including 2 women, a case that was dropped in June of 2016. In January 2017, he was arrested for a DUI, evading arrest, and auto theft. These charges were dropped later. In February 2020, he was arrested in Virginia on drug possession, and then a month later, he was arrested in Virginia for violating his bail conditions. That same month, he was arrested in Virginia for a 3rd time after allegedly assaulting his wrestler and girlfriend at the time, Maria Manick, assaulting her at the home of wrestler Ace Montana, who called the police, with Montana claiming he had to point a gun at Hart to get him away from Manick. It was this story that finally drove Hart out of wrestling. He has only wrestled 1 event since this, that being a Juggalo Championship Wrestling event in December 2020, but nothing other than that. He has effectively been blacklisted. And yes, in case you're wondering, he did have more legal troubles. In October 2020, he was charged with injuring a disabled person, evading arrest, and drug possession. And he was arrested for these exact same charges in March 2021 once again, in, you guessed it, Virginia. Before anyone says a word, a full video on Sonny will be out in the future on this channel. A couple of minutes just simply isn't enough to talk about Sonny and everything that went on with her. Sonny first got into wrestling through her partner at the time, Chris Candido, and she would accompany him to shows for Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and this helped her to get noticed by the WWF, and she was signed by them in 1995 as a manager and occasional wrestler. And Sonny was entitled the original diva by the WWE, and she has been credited as being someone who ushered in women's wrestling in the company. She lasted 3 years in the company in her first run, being released in 1998 amid rumors of painkiller addictions, problems backstage with other wrestlers, and no showing multiple appearances. However, Sunny would stick around in wrestling. She made appearances for ECW for a bit, she appeared for WCW before they died off, and had made numerous indie appearances all across the country and the world in wrestling. And over the years, she would also make occasional appearances for WWE. She appeared at the 50th anniversary of Raw in 2007, and she appeared in the 25 Diva Battle Royal at WrestleMania 25. My god, what an awful match that was. And in 2011, she was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame by the entire Divas roster, which is a huge message to send and just shows how valuable she was to WWE and how high in regard that they held her. But it was only the next year that would be the beginning of the end for Sunny. In 2012, Sunny, or Tammy Lynn Sitch, which we will now be referring to her as her real name, was arrested 5 times in a 4-week span for disorderly conduct, third-degree burglary, and 3 counts of violating a protective order. And this was the start of Sunny's, or Tammy Lynn Sitch's, very turbulent troubles with the law. For the next 5 years, Sitch was being arrested multiple times per year. The most common thing that Sitch was being arrested for was driving under the influence. In March 2019, Sitch was imprisoned. And this was all due to the fact that Sitch had committed so many crimes and DUIs and all this stuff in so many different states and territories, and having revoked paroles, multiple of them, and many warrants for her arrest, which combined into a prison sentence of 1 year. Sorry to people who actually know how the law works, I know I didn't explain that well. I'm just explaining it in terms that us dummies will understand. She was released from prison in February 25th, 2020, but she's been straight back at it since being released. And it brings us to our most recent incident from Sunny, or Tammy Lynn Sitch, where she was involved in a fatal car crash in Volusia County, Florida, that killed a 75-year-old man. Sitch crashed into the rear of the man's car, who had been stopped at a stoplight, and witnesses had told the police that Sitch was driving at a high speed when she crashed into the car. She was arrested on DUI and manslaughter charges, and has been in jail while she awaits her trial. She is facing 26 years in prison if she is convicted of her manslaughter and DUI charges. On August 31st, 2015, a bombshell news story dropped about a man who was reportedly shot outside of the WWE Performance Center. At around 1:40 PM, police arrived to the Performance Center responding to a report of trespassing they received. At first, details of the incident weren't revealed, but soon after the suspect was revealed to be a 29-year-old man named Armando Montalvo. It was said that 2 deputies approached Montalvo, who may have been armed with a knife, and after he refused to comply, he charged at one of the officers, leading the officer to retreat and fire a single shot at him, which struck him. Montalvo reportedly suffered a life-threatening wound from the gunshot, and he had to undergo surgery, and it would be successful, and he lived. After this story started making the rounds, Triple H would get on Twitter to give some clarity to fans to tell them what is actually going on here. He stated the following: "Unfortunately, a deranged individual with no WWE affiliation who had a court order prohibiting him from being on WWE property was involved in an incident with an Orange County Sheriff's deputy in the parking lot of the WWE Performance Center. We defer to the Orange County Sheriff's Department for further comment and information." And soon after, the police would release their statement. Orange County Sheriff Jerry Demings held a press conference where he stated the following: "The wrestling org got a restraining order against Montalvo earlier this month after a string of violent run-ins at the facility. Earlier this summer, the WWE says Montalvo spread his feces and urine on the building. He even posted a video of himself mixing the human waste and reduced fat milk in a bucket." So yeah, as it turns out, this guy had been an ongoing issue for a month. It was also said that Montalvo had a fixation on a female wrestler, and after his social media was found, it was found out that AJ Lee was his wrestler that he was fixated on, who had been out of the WWE and retired for 5 months at that point, which begs the question why Montalvo tried to go. Oh, and yeah, a video of the whole thing was released.
Yo, you getting cut, dog. I see you, dog. Oh.
done something.
Hey,
Okay.
don't. I want you to know.
Oh, he's getting tased. He's getting tased. Oh, here we go. Here comes Scott. Oh gosh. Oh, now he's ruining the lance. Oh, he's going down.
The case would go to court, with more about Montalvo being revealed. It was revealed in court by his father that he is schizophrenic and has borderline personality disorder. In this court session, Montalvo claims that he was the victim and he pled not guilty to his charges of aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer, resisting arrest and trespassing. In the end, Montalvo was found as incompetent and sent to a state mental facility. However, Montalvo was not done with the WWE. In 2018, Montalvo would pop up again as he posted videos of himself on Instagram walking around Full Sail University during an NXT taping, shouting things such as, "Vince McMahon's people like to make things up. Oh my god, he's waving a big thick chain on our property. Trespass him. Lock him up." And, "You see, I'm bigger than NXT. I'm bigger than that whole organization. I'm bigger than McMahon." You might ask yourself, how has he made it outside an NXT taping? Why is nobody stopping this? And that's because, unfortunately for WWE, there was nothing saying that Montalvo couldn't be there, which is why the next month, WWE would officially file a restraining order. This was granted. The restraining order was granted. But I'm not even going to try and pretend that that's the end of the story. Montalvo did not stop. In May of 2020, WWE had to take Montalvo to court again. Dave McKinnon, who works event security for WWE at the Performance Center, noted in a court filing that he has witnessed Montalvo harassing WWE and its employees for at least the past 5 years. He also wrote that Montalvo has continued to ignore a court order from March 22nd, 2019. That said, Montalvo was prohibited from the Performance Center. They took Montalvo to court to try and get a permanent injunction order that was to bar Montalvo from several locations related to the WWE, with the Performance Center just being one of them. He had apparently spotted Montalvo on the property as late as that very same month. It seemed as though this guy just frequently popped up at the Performance Center. But once again, and I cannot stress this enough, this did not stop him. The very next month, he would swing by the Performance Center again, one last time. And yes, it was all caught on video, on a Facebook Live, filmed by Montalvo himself.
From my crib down the street.
Hey, I'll meet you halfway right here. 5 seconds and I'm leaving. You want the handshake? 5, 4,
I want a hug.
3. I'll give you the hug. 5, 4.
For real?
Yes, sir.
He's gonna shoot me. You gonna take me to jail for this?
You have 5 seconds.
See?
All right. Well, that's your opportunity and you lost it. So either you make the decision or I'm leaving. 1, 2, 3.
The opportunity to what? To debut on Monday Night Raw?
Come on. Right here. This is your chance, honey. It's Monday and then it's 8:32. We're live. I gotta go. I got stuff to do. Either obviously you don't make the decision, your chance is up. Stay there and make a fool out of yourself.
Okay.
Let's go.
Let's go where?
Come on. Monday Night Raw starting. It's 8:32. You wanna go live? Let's go.
You gonna take me to jail for this? Hold on. You guys are gonna take me to jail for this? Huh? Huh? So it's a trap.
This took place in June of 2020. In the video, you can hear the likes of Dana Brooke and Lacey Evans try to get him to leave. Meanwhile, he shouts about his wrestling dream and makes other nonsensical statements. That same month, on June 22nd, 2020, he would come back to the Performance Center again during Monday Night Raw. He stopped by the Performance Center to yell things such as, "Where are the divas?" Police were called and Montalvo was detained, and from jail, he would send the WWE attorney this letter. So yeah, go ahead, pause it, try reading it. All of this has been relived in a documentary by A&E in September of this year, which I would highly recommend. It has loads of footage of everything that happened. And yes, all this is supposedly the inspiration for Scripps, the character that Reggie has debuted as in NXT recently. Apparently, it's taken inspiration from this case. And yeah, that's about the story so far. And I put the emphasis on so far, and I'm just really covering my tracks because you never know what this guy is going to do and how nothing is ever going to stop him. Eugene Otto Zumhofe was born March 21st, 1951 in Ham Lake, Minnesota, United States. He made his wrestling debut aged 21 in 1972, having been trained by Vern Gagne, along with Ricky Steamboat, Scott Irwin, and the Iron Sheik. He had a gimmick where he carried a boombox around, and he mainly wrestled across the AWA, or the American Wrestling Association, as well as World Class Championship Wrestling, or WCCW. He wrestled under the name of Buck Zumhofe, and he had a fair bit of success in wrestling. He was a 3-time AWA World Light Heavyweight Champion, as well as a 2-time NWA American Tag Team Champion. He made some sporadic appearances for the WWF in the 80s and 90s, and he even got a match against The Undertaker in 1991. But Buck Zumhofe was hiding something. Or well, he wasn't really, because it was very much in plain sight. In July 1986, he was jailed when he was found guilty of sexual misconduct involving a minor. You might be wondering, didn't you just say that he wrestled The Undertaker in 1991, and now you're saying that he was found guilty of misconduct with a minor in 1986? Yes I am. Apparently, it made no difference back then. And when I say it made no difference, I mean it made no difference, because on January 23rd, 1989, Buck was arrested once again. He spent 36 months in prison after being convicted of 4th degree sexual conduct with a minor once again. And hey, once again, it didn't affect his wrestling career whatsoever. And throughout the 2000s, Buck would still continue to wrestle occasionally, wrestling as recently and as late as 2012 at age 60. But in 2013, Buck was again arrested, and this time, he was put away for good. He was arrested on May 27, 2013, and charged with 12 felony counts of criminal sexual misconduct. This was for sexually abusing his daughter between 1999 and 2011, beginning when she was just 15 years old, and he was convicted on all 12 counts on March 5th, 2014. Zumhofe attempted to flee the courthouse after the verdict was made, and he was quickly tackled by court officers and charged with escape from custody, to add to all the other charges. And he was officially sentenced to 25 years in prison on May 6th, 2014, and he remains in prison to this day now. Harrison Norris Jr. was born August 22nd, 1966 in Kennesaw, Georgia, and after graduating high school in Pensacola, Florida, he would enlist in the US Army, and he saw action in Operation Desert Shield and Operation Desert Storm. He was honorably discharged in 1995 and looked to do some other things in his career, namely professional wrestling. In 1995, he would begin training at the WCW Power Plant and later debut in WCW that same year as a jobber. He would get an occasional TV match for WCW, always being jobbed out in just mere minutes. I mean, this guy was such a jobber that according to his cage match, he only has 2 wins in his entire career, and both of them were on WCW house shows. He would take some time away from wrestling to start appearing in tough man competitions while still being signed to WCW, and in 2001, when WCW was bought by the WWF, his contract was not retained and carried over to the company, and he would subsequently retire from professional wrestling. In 2000, he was involved in a lawsuit with several other former WCW talents against the former parent company of WCW, AOL Time Warner, where they were alleging racial discrimination. The suit was settled out of court, with the plaintiffs receiving a high payout each. Following this, it went a bit quiet with Hardbody Harrison, who wasn't not really doing much, other than in the mid-2000s when he got into some trouble with the law. First, on August 18th, 2004, he was arrested by the police department in his hometown in Georgia on 3 counts of false imprisonment. He spent 1 night in jail and was released on $55,000 bond the next day. However, then the next year, on August 23rd, 2005, FBI agents would receive a search warrant and they raided Harrison's 2 homes in Bartow County, Georgia. on October 18, 2005, he was arrested by the FBI on a 9-count federal indictment for false imprisonment and trafficking women for commercial sex acts. In November 2007, he was convicted by a federal jury in Atlanta on charges of relating to keeping 8 women as sex slaves, and a lot was revealed during proceedings. It was revealed that Harrison was keeping these women in his homes with his wife and child. Harrison contended that they were staying in the houses because he was training them to be professional wrestlers and helping them to quit drugs. However, witnesses contended that Harrison had manipulated the women psychologically, forced them to have sex with him, and pimped them out to nightclubs, trailer parks, and hotels. This went on in North Carolina and northern Georgia until a few of the women decided to go to the police. And upon all this information, and after the conviction, Harrison was sentenced to life in prison. Chazen Rance began wrestling in 1999 across the Florida independent scene, and would do so for many years, even making appearances for the Orlando-based TNA on episodes of Impact as a jobber in the early to mid 2000s. However, Rance never really made it far in his wrestling career. He never really got his big break, and he mainly just wrestled in the Florida scene. As I said before, he was an okay wrestler, but again, he never really had a big break, and would never really make any headlines. That was until 2010. When Chazen Rance was arrested in 2010, accused of having sexual relations with a teenager. In 2011, he was charged with lewd behavior as well as battery and sex with a 12 to 15-year-old, and in 2014, he was officially added to the sex offender registry. I cannot stress enough that he was charged and found guilty of this. So yeah, within 30 seconds of talking about Chazen Rance, that should be the end of this story, right? No. Because following his arrest, he would take a whole 7 months out of wrestling, according to Cage Match, and then just simply came back, and for some reason people were just fine with it. He was actively wrestling during his court case, and looking at his Cage Match, he wasn't going longer than a month without wrestling. As quick as he was arrested, found guilty, and charged, he was even quicker at returning to wrestling and keeping on going like nothing had ever happened. And soon after, he would also open the Team Vision Dojo, a wrestling training school in Orlando, Florida. That's right, a wrestling training school being headed by a literal sex offender. Many popular wrestlers to this day continue to shamelessly use the Team Vision facility, despite it being a very well-known secret who owns it. As well as this, the Team Vision Dojo continues to accept minors to train at the school with Rance, and Rance himself is one half of the tag team champions for the school's promotion, with the other half being a 16-year-old girl. Just weird. Team Vision released the following statement to Bodyslam.net when questioned on this. Hello, Chazen Rance was deemed guilty in the court of law in 2011 for actions that took place in 2008. During his time on probation, Chazen was in therapy, not allowed to interact with minors, and had to submit to drug testing. Chazen completed everything that was required by law and went back to training minors again, showing full knowledge of his past with parents. Chazen continues to be one of the best trainers in professional wrestling around, and there's no denying that. While the actions of the past look very bad, the future looks bright for all those that Chazen continues to help. Thank you for any concerns. Everyone at Team Vision Dojo is doing great, and have many big projects continuing and others in the work. If you would like to contact Chazen regarding anything else or other false accusations that this website has promoted in the past that was debunked, feel free to contact him at chazen@gmail.com. Why Chazen was still allowed to continue to wrestle is absolutely beyond me, and I'm sure this video might elicit some sort of response from him, so that will be interesting to see if that does take place. But as I say, it is an absolute disgrace that this guy is still able to wrestle. 5th of March 2019, it was announced by the WWE that the Hart Foundation would be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame on April 6th, 2019 as part of that year's WrestleMania weekend. It was Bret Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart who were being inducted as part of the Hart Foundation. This would be Bret's second induction and Jim the Anvil Neidhart's first induction, and the award was to be accepted by Bret and Natalia, as Jim the Anvil Neidhart had passed away, Natalia being Jim's daughter, and of course a current WWE wrestler. The Hall of Fame came around and it was time for the Hart Foundation to accept their induction as Bret and Natalia got in the ring to give their speech and accept the award. But whilst they were giving this speech, this happened. We saw a man run up to Bret Hart, a distressed grunt seemingly from Hart, and then the feed cut and went black. What the hell just happened? Well, this did. In case you're wondering, that was Travis Brown, Ronda Rousey's husband and former UFC fighter who made the tackle, and also a quick shout out to the guy who should also maybe be an MMA fighter, Cash Wheeler, who knocked his lights out with one right hook. And thanks to all the wrestlers who stormed the ring and helped calm down the crowd and get the show back on track, the show would go on. But that moment would be all that anyone would be thinking about following the Hall of Fame. And following, the man would be identified. He was identified as Zachary Madison, and he was arrested and charged with 2 counts of assault following the incident. The reason he gave to the cops for the attack was that he felt it was the right moment. And after this, his social media was found, and some of the posts on there were just downright bizarre. Luckily, Bret Hart ended up okay, and this guy hasn't popped up on any more WWE events or had any other incidents. Why he wanted to attack Bret Hart of all people, an old man, very strange, very weird, but we'll never know, I guess. It was the right moment for him. That was the explanation. In 2020, Sonya Deville would probably have her most active year in the WWE and was in the midst of a brand new heel run. She was mid-feud with Mandy Rose following a heel turn that saw her exposed by the SmackDown hacker, leading to the Dolph Ziggler vs Otis match at that year's Mania. It was probably the hottest angle going into that year's Mania, and she was a part of it. Mandy and Sonya would continue their feud all the way up to SummerSlam that year, with a loser leaves WWE match scheduled to be taking place. You might be wondering, why are they doing a loser leaves WWE match? Is this person about to leave WWE forever? Well, no, usually not. Usually these matches are used to just simply write a wrestler off of TV, to have a reason why they're going away from WWE for a while. So, why is someone being written off TV here? And who? Well, the person that was being written off was of course Sonya Deville, and there's a very dark and sinister reason as to why that Sonya Deville needed some time away from the WWE. In August of 2020, Sonya Deville's home was broken into by a man named Philip A. Thomas. When Thomas broke into the home, both Sonya Deville and Mandy Rose were present in the house. According to reports, the house alarm went off at 2:45 AM whilst the two were sleeping. The alarm obviously woke them up, and they went to look out the window to investigate why the alarm was going off. And what they saw was a horrifying sight, because it was there that they saw Thomas outside holding a knife and a mace spray. The two thankfully fled the scene unharmed and called 911. Thomas didn't get to see them, and supposedly he waited downstairs for Sonya, thinking that she was hiding upstairs, waiting for her to come down. Thomas was of course arrested, and when he was arrested, he even admitted that he was there to kidnap her, and he was also found to be carrying duct tape and zip ties, which very much suggests that kidnapping was his motive. And once again, another disturbing aspect of this case was the fact that he was absolutely obsessed with her on social media and tweeted at her for literal years. The video you're seeing being rolled behind you in the background is his Twitter feed at the time after the arrest took place, exposing just how obsessed with Sonya Deville this guy really was. Following the incident, Sonya Deville tweeted out saying, "Thank you everyone for your love and concern. A very frightening experience, but thankfully everyone is safe. A special thank you to Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office for their response and assistance." And Sonya Deville would lose that match with Mandy Rose to give her some time away from WWE while she went and dealt with the court case. The case was, however, put to a close after Thomas was deemed unfit to stand trial. But since then, no incidents have taken place with this individual and with this individual within WWE, and Sonya Deville has since returned to the WWE and is wrestling actively again. G-Raver began his career in 2007 in CZW, being really thrown right into the deep end, debuting for CZW. However, that match would only be the one match, and it would only be a couple years after that he would come back to CZW, but first he would go the next few years wrestling for various promotions across the independent scene in America. He won many titles and really established himself as being a death match wrestler. But G-Raven never really got his big break, and it was the rise of GCW which was very beneficial to him, like it was very beneficial to other deathmatch wrestlers who are now getting a lot more regular bookings for a better production company like GCW, and probably getting paid better, I imagine, because Carney deathmatch promoters are still very much out there. He made his first appearances for GCW in 2016, which would also be the same year he would return to CZW, which would signify that he's done pretty well between the time he initially debuted there and now, showing that he's done well to get back there. And 2016 to 2020 would also end up being the most busy years of his career, and easily the prime of his career. He won the GCW Tag Team Championship in July of 2021 with Jimmy Lloyd. He only held it for a week, but this was significant because it showed how G-Raver had done pretty alright for himself on the indie scene, all things considered. He never got his big break from a bigger company, but he pretty much reached a good height that he can reach for an independent wrestler, you know, a champion for GCW, who one of the higher indie companies. But as quick as he rose, the harder he fell. On the 2nd of March 2022, a woman accused G-Raver of physically assaulting her. And a couple months later, she would post some screenshots between her and G-Raver, showing some pretty damning screenshots and some pretty uncomfortable screenshots to read. In her initial statement, she also mentioned the following: "This man is dangerous, manipulative, and a drug addict. He's a danger to every woman he encounters and shouldn't be in this community anymore." And there's some undeniable weight to that statement, given that months later, G-Raver was busted by the cops for drug possession. In fact, here's a list of everything he was charged with: manufacture, delivery, or possession with an intent to manufacture or deliver, obviously for drugs, violation of hazard regulation, use/possession of drug paraphernalia, intentional possession of a controlled substance by a person not registered, possession of marijuana, small personal use, driving under the influence of alcohol or a controlled substance, failure to keep right, failure to use safety belt, driver and front seat occupant, and careless driving. It has now been over a year since G-Raver last wrestled, and I'd be surprised if we ever saw him in the ring again. Ted DiBiase Jr., the son of Ted DiBiase, debuted for the WWE in 2008, winning the tag titles in his first match with Cody Rhodes. The two would soon after join up with Randy Orton to form Legacy, a trio made up of second and third generation wrestlers, and Legacy was very successful as a trio. Rhodes and DiBiase won the World Tag Team Championships 2 times while the trio were together, and Randy Orton won the WWE title 3 times whilst in the group. In 2010 though, the group would split up, culminating in a triple threat match at WrestleMania 26 that was won by Randy Orton. And unfortunately for Ted DiBiase Jr. from here, he wouldn't really do much. Randy Orton would continue as a main eventer well into the modern day, and Cody Rhodes would begin his ascension as a single star, and we all know everything he has done since then, and that has culminated in him being one of the biggest stars in wrestling today. Ted DiBiase Jr. though, he started the DiBiase posse. That's the levels between the three of them. WWE tried to recapture the magic of his dad by giving DiBiase Jr. the $1 Million Championship, Maurice as his on-screen girlfriend, and even brought back Virgil. But just none of it worked. And Ted DiBiase Jr. never really amounted to anything following the split of Legacy. On August 26, 2013, DiBiase announced that due to suffering anxiety and depression, that he wouldn't be renewing his WWE contract, and he would be gone from the company soon after. DiBiase would wrestle 3 more matches on 2013, and another 2 in 2016 and 2017 respectively, before calling it a day for his wrestling career. And it would all go quiet as Ted DiBiase Jr.'s name would fizzle away. Until May of 2022. But first, we have to go back to February 2020, where the Office of the Mississippi State Auditor arrested 6 people that it accused of mishandling federal funds dispersed by the Mississippi Department of Human Services. Please follow with me here. These arrests would kick off a major government fraud scandal, which when we fast forward to May of 2022, the Auditor's Office have released a report identifying $94 million in questionable spending, with it being funneled through two non-profit organizations, and the investigation found that this money was made available to numerous notable people, including football player Brett Favre and the DiBiase family, whom were sued. They were sought to recover $20 million in money that was squandered from the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families anti-poverty program. Essentially, because I know this is very tough to follow, the DiBiase family received money fraudulently through non-profit organizations that were meant to be used to benefit needy Mississippians. But they weren't. They were just given to the DiBiase family. In September 2022, John Davis, who was the director of the Mississippi Department of Human Services, was sentenced to 90 years in prison for 5 counts of conspiracy and 13 counts of defrauding the government. Alberto Del Rio debuted on the WWE SmackDown brand in 2010. He was 10 years deep into his career and had wrestled for AAA, CMLL, and had a short run in WWE's developmental territory, Florida Championship Wrestling. Alberto Del Rio was pushed heavily, very quickly into his WWE career, with him beating Rey Mysterio in his first feud in the company and having a world title match at TLC 2010. Only 6 months after his debut. And while he was unsuccessful in winning that match, he would be successful in winning the 2011 40-man Royal Rumble match, guaranteeing him a title shot at WrestleMania. One that he would unfortunately lose, but it seems that WWE wasn't done pushing him, as he would win that year's Raw Money in the Bank briefcase, which he would successfully and infamously cash in on CM Punk to win the WWE title at that year's SummerSlam. That summer was obviously very turbulent for the WWE title scene, and nobody really wanted to see Alberto as champion, but his push would continue for the next few years with a couple of reigns of the World Heavyweight Championship in the next couple of years, until 2014, when out of nowhere, Del Rio was released from his WWE contract for unprofessional conduct. Allegedly, Del Rio had slapped a worker who made a racist joke to him. Del Rio would return to the WWE a year later, winning the US title on his first match back, and during this run, Del Rio would get into a relationship with fellow WWE wrestler Paige, and this is where everything went off the rails. The two got together in May 2016 and were engaged by October of that same year. But also by that point, Del Rio was out of the WWE again and had nuclear heat with the company, as well as Paige's family, who did not support her being engaged to him, and it all came to a head after an incident between the two at an airport in 2017. Reports came out that the two had a domestic dispute and an investigation was ongoing, stemming from a domestic violence battery incident at Orlando Airport, and audio of the incident was leaked. In said audio, you can hear Del Rio threatening to call the police on Paige, and Paige telling him to leave her the fuck alone and get out of her life. The investigation was eventually concluded with no charges being brought about, and the couple split up that same year. Now gone from the WWE, Del Rio has not managed to stay out of trouble. In 2020, Del Rio was arrested after allegedly battering and sexually assaulting his girlfriend, and in October of that same year, he was formally charged with aggravated kidnapping and sexual assault. The trial kept on getting delayed and delayed until December 2021, when the charges were all eventually dropped. Nowadays, Del Rio mainly wrestles in Mexico, having been blackballed from every major promotion in America, wrestling with his friends and people I mentioned before, Travis Banks and Marty Scurll, the latter being a name for another video to discuss. And he will never ever return to the WWE, despite how many times he has tried to convince us that he is. In 2016, Jake Atlas made his wrestling debut, and for the next couple of years he would make his mark on the independent scene, wrestling for the likes of Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, Beyond Wrestling, Warrior Wrestling, PWG, GCW, and Ring of Honor. On October 23rd, 2019, Jake Atlas would sign with the WWE for the NXT brand. It was his big break. However, I think it's fair to say that his WWE run was very uneventful. Jake mainly wrestled in the Cruiserweight division and on 205 Live, with his biggest match being against Santos Escobar for the Cruiserweight title, which he lost. And on August 6, 2021, after just under 2 years in the WWE, Jake Atlas was released from his contract as part of a round of budget cut releases. Following his WWE release, he'd wrestled for GCW and Ring of Honor in September 2021, but shortly after, he announced his retirement from wrestling. But nobody retires in wrestling, and 3 months later, Jake Atlas was back. He appeared on AEW Dark in December, coming out of retirement and defeating Serpentico. And then on the January 7th edition of AEW Rampage, Jake Atlas would face Adam Cole in a match. He would lose the match, but he was announced as being all elite after the show. Jake Atlas was back, and in a big way. Unfortunately for him though, he got injured in this match, suffering a knee injury that would leave him out for most of a year. And even more unfortunately was that only a few months into his injury, controversy would call. As on May 3rd, 2022, Jake Atlas was arrested after his boyfriend called the police on him. Atlas had reportedly scratched his boyfriend and tore his tank top during an argument over a sexual encounter. Jake Atlas was charged with misdemeanor domestic battery, and Jake Atlas, in a tweet that no longer exists, apologized for his actions and said that he was under the influence when it happened, and says though that does not excuse his behavior, he has been attending an alcohol abuse treatment program for the past 7 years, and he intends to continue. The charges were later dropped, but a video of the arrest was released showing the footage from the police's POV, showing Jake Atlas pull the I'm famous card, call his boyfriend a nobody, a bitch ass, and said that he was bad at sex. It's an uncomfortable video. Jake Atlas's contract finished with AEW, who had no intention to re-sign him in October 2022, and he has not been involved in wrestling since. In 1992, Eastern Championship Wrestling was born, and what started as just any regular promotion in Philadelphia would soon gather a cult following audience and regular spectators at events who were drawn to Eastern Championship Wrestling and their gritty, grunge, and hardcore style of wrestling, thus causing Eastern Championship Wrestling to appropriately rename to what it would forever be known as Extreme Championship Wrestling. In 1994, the ECW Arena was found, as well as their TV show ECW Hardcore TV, and the next year in 1995, the company was sold to head booker Paul Heyman, who would become synonymous with ECW and would take it to the heights that it got to. ECW succeeded because it wasn't afraid to push the boundaries, but sometimes it would come back to bite them, and ECW style would often see people get hurt, from wrestlers, fans posing as wrestlers, and fans. On 28th October 1995, Extreme Championship Wrestling was holding an event at the ECW Arena in Philadelphia with a main event of Cactus Jack vs Tommy Dreamer. It doesn't get more ECW than that. Tommy Dreamer won the match after planting Cactus Jack with the DDT, and after the match, a post-match brawl ensued, and once again, classic ECW. Raven came out post-match to attack Dreamer, hitting him with a DDT of his own, and Terry Funk also came out with a flaming branding iron to make the save for Dreamer, and began taking it to Raven and Cactus Jack. The numbers game got to Funk though, as Jack and Raven beat him down and they held him back as they looked to brutalize him with a chair wrapped with a towel that was lit on fire.
Be cool about
Yeah.
Fire spots are nothing new in wrestling. We've seen many of them. Mick Foley and Edge, Cody and Andrade, etc, etc, and for the most part, they are done safely. There are big things that need to be taken account for when doing fire spots. First of all is keeping everyone safe. That's the wrestlers doing the fire spot, the wrestlers taking fire, that's the fans, it's everyone. And another is making sure you are responsive if anything does go wrong, so it can quickly be sorted. I think you know where I'm going with this. Cactus Jack hit Tommy Dreamer with the flaming chair and he caught fire. He went to hit Terry Funk, but he rolled out the way. Apparently what was meant to happen here was the chair rebound back at Cactus Jack and hit him. However, what actually happened was due to the impact of the chair hitting the ring mat. The flaming towel fell off the chair and set Terry Funk on fire. And remember what I said earlier about needing to be responsive in case something goes wrong with fire? Well, ECW employees eventually run to the ring with fire extinguishers, but instead of helping out Terry Funk, who was very visibly distressed, they focused their attention on extinguishing the towel and putting out the fire on the towel. This led to fans trying to help Terry Funk out, which only led to the flames spreading further. And then the lights went out. The lights going out only caused further chaos as fans stampeded towards the exit with the flames still active. After many moments of panic, Paul Heyman ordered the lights be turned back on and the fire was put out. Finally. After it was all said and done, Dreamer and Funk were both hospitalized, with the former suffering a broken nose and burnt back, and the latter suffering second-degree burns on his right arm. A fan broke his nose and another fan broke their leg from the stampede, and numerous fans suffered burns. ECW were of course taken to court, with one fan in attendance attempting to sue ECW after claiming he suffered burnt hands. During this case, ECW claimed the tape for the event had been accidentally erased the following week. How convenient. The case was later dismissed, and when WWE purchased ECW Tape Library in 2003, it removed any possibility of footage of this show ever existing, if their claim that they accidentally deleted it isn't already to be believed. There is no fan footage of the event or incident, and the only thing we have are these fan-taken photos that have been displayed throughout the video so far.
Now, police in suburban Atlanta are investigating what appears to be a murder-suicide involving WWE wrestler Chris Benoit. The 40-year-old, his wife, and 7-year-old son were found dead in their home Monday afternoon.
We all know the story of Chris Benoit, the WWE wrestler who on the weekend of June 22, 2007, murdered his wife and son before taking his own life. It's one of the most notorious murder stories in history, and it's an event that brought about major changes to the WWE. After toxicology reports showed that Benoit had the brain of an 80-year-old Alzheimer's patient, WWE introduced their concussion protocol and would be much more strict in enforcing their wellness policy. But the biggest change made in regards to Chris Benoit and the WWE was WWE's attempt at completely removing Benoit from their history, which is something they followed through on, and to be honest, did the best they could given how prominent Chris Benoit was in the company. Chris Benoit was a main eventer from the company, a former world champion, Royal Rumble winner, and WrestleMania main eventer. So whilst it's impossible to scrub his matches and achievements, they've pretty much scrubbed his name from all programmings and media, except for one form of media. Chris Benoit's likeness and character still features in numerous wrestling video games, but perhaps the game that most of you will remember him for is SmackDown vs. Raw 2007, and that's thanks in part to the fact that this was his most recent and last ever video game appearance. Playing as Chris Benoit is weird, because you are quite literally controlling a murderer in a video game, a real life murderer in a video game, and how many times can you say that? Okay, maybe a few times, but you get the point. But this all begs the question, if Chris Benoit's last appearance was in SVR 2007, what happened to him in SmackDown vs. Raw 2008? He wasn't in the game for obvious reasons and was most likely removed during development post-tragedy, but does footage or images of him in the game exist? Is there a build of the game with him in it out there? what can we find out about Chris Benoit in SmackDown vs. Raw 2008? Well, it turns out a Reddit user by the name of Cinnamon0999 had the same thought as me and posted the following on the Lost Media subreddit. As you may know, professional wrestler Chris Benoit killed himself and his family in 2007. He was taken out of that year's WWE video game at the last moment, with the game being delayed due to this. I've always been fascinated by the fact that so little of him in the game survived though. His moves remain in the game's code, but that's about it. No screenshots or a build of the game with him in it seem to have survived. There's barely any info about this at all. But I did manage to find some interesting information on some surviving forum posts. I was at the local game store, Game Crazy, Hackensaw, New Jersey, and they had the new WWE game out to demo it. What surprised me was that Benoit was still in the game. I was under the impression that he had been removed. When I mentioned it to the sales clerk, he said that as far as he knew, this was the game that they were selling. There was no recall or change that he was aware of. While this may be a dead end if this is true, and I'm not sure why someone would lie about it, then it's entirely possible there's a demo kiosk with the Chris Benoit version of the game. This would be an unlikely discovery. There was another interesting quote here though. In Games Master magazine, they published an article on the game where the main star / wrestler is Chris Benoit. Unfortunately, the magazine was released the day after the suicide and it was already published. Ouch. On another note, it was said he would be on the front cover. Double ouch. So this post is interesting for many reasons. First of all, it features a story from an old forum post claiming a demo kiosk of the game with Benoit included existed. But it's the second story I read out that is far more interesting to me. This forum user is claiming that Chris Benoit was going to be the cover star for SVR 2008, which is kinda crazy, especially because they claim, as this post says, that this news was published in a Games Master magazine from June 2007 that was published the day after his death. So, a copy of this magazine has to exist, right? Well, unfortunately, after searching online for archives, I wasn't able to find an archive of June 2007's issue. However, I did find a copy on eBay, but it's been sold. Because I'm the one that bought it, we've got Games Master June 2007 issue. There it is. And as you can see, SmackDown vs. Raw 2008 is included in this. Anything on the back? No, not really. Okay, let's just crack straight into this. I did not read this magazine, so I don't relate to any of this. We got here page 54 is the one, and you can also see here SmackDown vs. Raw 2008, page 54. Let's go straight there. All right, here we go. I think we're coming up to it. Oh, here we are. Here we are, SmackDown v Raw 2008. What does it say about it? So at least on these two pages here, there isn't a sign of Benoit or mention of him anywhere. Nothing about him being on the cover, just regular SVR 2008 news. And, oh, there is more, to be fair, there is more. Not seeing anything immediately on these pages. Seems like we have another one to go through, though. That's it. Well, seemingly nothing to be shown here. Wow, what do you know? An old forum poster lied. Who would have thought? So yeah, either the forum poster has completely lied, or if the rare chance that an issue did come out, it would have been immediately recalled. But at least in this issue I have here that I found on eBay from June 2007, nothing in here about Chris Benoit and SmackDown vs. Raw 2008. So for now, all these questions about Chris Benoit and SmackDown vs. Raw 2008 remain a mystery.